Hi, and welcome to the curriculum preview for 4th grade science. This is the second 6 weeks preview. We're going to be talking about Unit 2, which is energy, force, and motion. Just before we get started and talk to you about a couple of key planning documents that you might want to have handy, either printed out or maybe open up so you can pause the video and then go ahead and refer to those documents on screen if you'd like. We're going to take a look at the pacing guide. We're going to briefly touch on some of the pieces of the unit overview, and then we're going to look at some resources within the clarifier. So let's go ahead and get started with the pacing guide. This is a one-pager that shows you the plan for the whole 6 weeks. And I want to talk just briefly about the order of the standards as well as the number of days for each one of the standards. This is really organized and created using a variety of different pieces of information. And so while this is a guide, it really has a thoughtful process that's gone into why we put some of the standards first. And I think you'll see that relationship as we go through and talk about some of the standards for this 6 weeks. You can see if by looking on the first row, we start off with 4.6a, and this is where students are going to take about 5 days to differentiate, and that means compare and contrast. So they're going to be comparing and contrasting different forms of energy, including mechanical, sound, electrical, light, and heat and thermal. It is connected with a process skill for using some of the tools that go along nicely with that particular standard. Then we're going to be moving into students looking at the difference between conductors and insulators. And then we've partnered that with demonstrating some of the electrical properties as it travels in a closed path, and then exploring an electromagnet. It's important to note, though, as you get into the planning documents, that even though differentiating between conductors and insulators is partnered with the electrical standard, 4.6b conductors and insulators includes that in the context for electricity as well as thermal energy. And so we'll touch upon that in just a little bit. Note that there are 3 process skills that are partnered with that, and that's really because those go well with the content standards. And most of the lessons that you're going to find in AIMS and STEM scopes have those process skills already embedded for you. We're going to wrap up the 6 weeks with a very long unit, 13 days, and this is to design an experiment that's going to test the effect of force on an object. This is a lot of days for several different reasons. One, you can see that there are lots and lots of process skills that are associated with this content standard. And a lot of those process skills are introductory. Your students have never formally designed an experiment before, and so that's going to take some time to practice that design process before even getting into the concept of force and then connecting those two things together. So again, scaffolding those will help to come back and really reinforce some of the content that was at the beginning of the 6 weeks and then on into the end. So just a couple of big ideas, takeaways from the pacing guide. Pay attention to the process skills that we just looked at with the content standard or the leading standard. And just a couple of points about some of those content standards. When they're differentiating, when the students are looking at the different forms of energy, just to let you know, mechanical, sound, and light, those were all introduced last year in 3rd grade, so your students should have an idea of these forms of energy, and so you can know that they're coming with a little prior knowledge on that. You'll touch on heat and thermal again when students differentiate between the conductors and insulators with heat and thermal, so just know that as you spend your planning time on 4.6a. And then you'll notice that the last form of energy, electrical energy, is in yellow. That's because this is a brand new concept for your students. So you're going to want to linger a little bit longer in that 5-day time on electrical energy, being that it's brand new. Now, they will explore that more deeply when they go into the next piece of the unit with insulators and conductors, and then looking at building circuits and electromagnets. So another thing to kind of keep in mind. So you can kind of think of this as an introduction to that form of energy and then exploring that a little bit later. The next pieces that we have for the content standards are looking at conductors and insulators. And again, here's that note about be sure to use thermal and electrical for comparing and contrasting conductors and insulators. So what that means is looking at different materials and which ones conduct or allow heat to go through and which ones stop heat to go through. And then which, as you build circuits, which materials allow the electrical energy to go through, which would be the conductor, and which ones stop it. So looking at that in two different contexts. Students are also going to be demonstrating making a closed circuit, which is brand new, that's why it's in yellow, as well as exploring an electromagnet, introductory as well. If you're not familiar with electromagnets and how to make those, you can go to two different sources. One in STEMscopes, the setup video shows in the video how students make the electromagnet. And I also have a 2-minute YouTube video that shows that in a little bit different way with just a little bit more detail, and you'll find that in the unit overview. Then we move into designing an experiment to test the effective force on an object. Note that this is in yellow, so this is a brand new concept as well. I point out what's new to your students because you'll want to linger a little bit longer or take some time to be sure that you introduce maybe the process skills that are associated with that separately from the content, and then move forward with an integration between both of those. So moving from the pacing guide to the unit overview, this is the other one of the essential planning documents in Forethought. This is just a screenshot of all the pages just to give you an idea of the function of this document. On the first page, you'll just see a screenshot of all of the standards in the 6 weeks. Here are the guiding questions for your students as they move through the unit. These are hints and tips, so this is where you're going to find hints about what does an electromagnet look like, what exactly do we mean when we talk about force, and what are some ideas for setting up an experiment and helping my kids design that. And then the last pages are specific standards with their specific learning resources in STEMscopes, in AIMS, in EduSmart, and other resources that we have. So the next screen shows some of the tools that are listed in one of your process skills, 4.4a, and these are all tools that for sure your students need to be experiencing this 6 weeks, and you can see that most of these will be used with the force and motion experiments that they design, including a spring scale, so you'll want to review how to use that. The mirror, of course, will be with properties of light energy. So within the unit overview, just a reminder, the guiding questions really should be used as discussion points for your students as you move through. You can also use those as formative assessments. So if your students can answer those questions using the unit vocabulary, you are well on your way to really thoroughly hitting the level that we need your kids to be at. Again, the approaches to classroom use just provides some hints and useful tips that come up from teachers or some things that I think need to be a little bit more clear or clarified for you. And then the resources is a list of the district resources by standard. So I just wanted to remind you that the AIMS lessons that are listed in the resources, they are in order of preference or they're categorized with notes. So I just wanted to make sure that you knew that those were really in there for a reason, and they've done a little bit of the legwork for the planning. Also, don't forget that STEMscopes Teacher Toolbox has these really great tool cards, and that's the image that you see right now of those line drawings. And there's also lessons for each one of those tools. So again, if your students are a little unsure about how to use a spring scale, there's a mini lesson and a little assessment on how to use that as well. So just a quick mention about vocabulary. Just a reminder that vocabulary can be found on each standard on the clarifier, and it's going to always list the academic and content vocabulary. Many teachers say that they love a section of STEMscopes called Picture Vocabulary, and it is a great resource, but we really need to remember that it has some but not all the vocabulary for the particular standard. So always go by the list that's on the clarifier first. So in this example, you can see this column has words specifically and right from the standard. And then there's some related words that aren't listed in the standard, but are still really important words to cover. This really should be your list. STEM scopes may or may not have all of them, or may have some additional words that might be nice to know, but this will be the main list. Since we're talking about clarifiers, I want to go ahead and talk to you about some additional resources that the clarifiers offer, and just show you a couple of examples of those. So the first clarifier, I'm going to go ahead and just pull this over and take a look at a couple of things on here that you might or not know about. Let me make this larger. So this is the clarifier for the process skill 4.4a, and it lists all of the tools that students use throughout the whole year. And there's the list of all of the terms. The thing I wanted to show you here, though, was that on the sample assessments, oftentimes there will be things that you can actually use with your students for instruction. So for instance, I've created this little grid that shows some of the more, the newer tools, or the tools that maybe your students are not that familiar with. And there's just a quick little assessment or activity that they can do. And I've also included some samples from the Teacher Toolbox little primer that they have, as well as what that might look like on 5th grade STAR. So just to give you an idea of the scope of what some of those assessments look like. The next view that I want to show you is, pull this over. This is from the clarifier for 4.6D. I wanted to remind you that these also have the vertical alignment of the standard. So for this particular standard, if you look at 4th grade, here's the column that has your particular standard. And you'll notice that it's not a supporting or standard for 5th grade. However, it is extremely important that you lay the foundation, because you can see how this is a supporting standard on STAR for 5th grade. And then as we move through 7th grade, it's a supporting standard in 8th grade. And then on the 8th grade test, it's related to the readiness standard. So on some of these really far-reaching standards that have a thread that go all the way up through 8th grade, I will put that vertical alignment there so you can see how important it is for you to lay that solid foundation. And again, I will put in some sample assessments from STEM Scope so you can see what that looks like. And I'll also have some of the released STAR questions. These may or may not be used with your students, but at least you'll be able to see where your kiddos are going with this and what they'll be expected to be answering on STAR. So just a couple of things I wanted to show you regarding some information on the clarifier. I want to wrap up our time together by just reminding you that if you're watching this, then you found the curriculum preview given to you digitally this year on Canvas. And if you go back to the Canvas page, right underneath the link for this video, you're going to see this graphic. And this is an extension for the digital curriculum previews that we're doing this year. And it's called C3. And it's a time that we've set together after school for you to meet with your coordinator from any content or your colleagues. It's come and go. It's really driven by whatever your needs are. So if you really need to see a type of circuit put together, or you need some help maybe understanding how the electromagnet works, you just come and we can work on that together. It's very informal, it's optional, but it is something that we're trying to do based on your feedback from the curriculum previews last year. So even though we're providing these digitally, we want to give you that opportunity to meet face-to-face if that's something that you need. So you can find the some more for the C3 back on the Canvas page, as well as the link to register in Eduphoria. Thanks so much for joining me. Good luck this 6 weeks, and let me know if I can help you support your instruction in any way.